The ballroom of the Dlamini mansion shimmered under golden lights. Laughter, music, and clinking glasses filled the air as Lagos's richest gathered to celebrate Chief Olufemi Dlamini's 60th birthday. His daughter Amira stood near the stage, dressed in a sleek emerald gown. She'd always been proud of her father's success and the orphanage foundation they ran together, until the rumors started. All night, she'd tried to ignore the whispers about the missing $2 million donation. But when she finally gathered her courage and asked him, her voice shaking slightly, everything changed. "Dad," she said quietly, "the money meant for the children, where did it go?" The music stopped. People turned. The chief's face darkened. Without warning, his hand cracked across her face, loud enough to silence the entire hall. "You ungrateful brat," he roared, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "I wish I never raised you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Politicians looked away, pretending not to see. Amira's cheek burned, her eyes stung, but her heart hurt more than anything. She wanted to explain, to tell him she only asked because she cared. But before she could speak, he grabbed the microphone. "From this day forward," he announced, "Amira Dlamini is no longer part of my family or my will. She will not receive a single cent of my inheritance." Laughter broke somewhere in the back, nervous, cruel. Her mother stood frozen, her eyes cold. No one moved to help her. Amira's vision blurred as she turned and walked out, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The night air hit her face, mixing with her tears. For the first time in her life, she realized the truth. The man she called father had just turned her into a stranger. But as the gates closed behind her, she didn't know that the slap meant to destroy her was about to reveal who she truly was. The days after the slap felt like a nightmare Amira couldn't wake up from. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Videos of that moment had gone viral. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire's daughter disgraced at father's party." Strangers mocked her online. Old friends who once begged to sit at her table suddenly stopped replying to her messages. The same people who had smiled for photos with her now pretended she didn't exist. Within a week, her credit card stopped working. Her accounts were frozen. The luxury apartment in Victoria Island that her father had gifted her was locked by security guards. When she called home, the maid answered and simply said, "Chief says you shouldn't return." Then the line went dead. She moved into a small, dim flat on the edge of Ikoyi, a world away from the mansion she grew up in. The walls were cracked, the fan made more noise than wind, and at night she could hear rats scratching in the pipes. She sold her designer handbags one by one, just to buy groceries. Every morning, she woke up early to do freelance design jobs on her old laptop. She had studied graphic design years ago, mostly for fun, but now it was all she had. Sometimes, clients would cancel payments when they realized she was that Amira Dlamini. "Sorry, bad publicity," one email read. She laughed bitterly because if she didn't, she would have cried again. Still she kept going. She refused to beg her father for forgiveness. Pride was all she had left. One humid morning while she was sketching a logo for a local bakery, she heard a car pull up outside. A sleek black SUV. Her heart skipped. No one ever visited her. Through the window, she saw two men in dark suits step out, holding files. She thought they might be debt collectors or maybe reporters trying to get another story out of her shame. Moments later there was a firm knock. "Miss Dlamini?" one of them asked politely. "Yes," she said carefully, opening the door just halfway. He showed her a badge. "We're lawyers from the firm of Adebayo and Partners. We need to discuss your birth records. May we come in?" Amira froze. "My what?" "Your birth records," the other man repeated, lowering his voice. "It's very important." She hesitated, then stepped aside. Her tiny living room smelled faintly of instant noodles and paint thinner, but they didn't seem to care. They sat down, placing a thick envelope on her table. Amira's hands trembled. "Is this about my father?" "Not exactly," one lawyer said gently. "It's about you." Something about his tone made her stomach twist. She had been humiliated, disowned, and abandoned. What could possibly be left to take from her? The lawyer met her eyes. "Miss Dlamini, there are serious irregularities in your records." We believe you were never supposed to be in the Dlamini household. Her breath caught. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. He simply opened the file, revealing faded documents, photos, and a name she didn't recognize. For the first time since her father's slap, Amira's fear wasn't about being rejected. It was about the feeling that she didn't even know who she truly was. Amira sat frozen on the edge of her couch as the lawyers spread papers across her small wooden table. Her old laptop screen still glowed behind them, the half-finished bakery logo forgotten. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. The older lawyer cleared his throat. Miss Dlamini, he began softly, we recently conducted a DNA verification as part of Chief Dlamini's estate audit. Amira frowned. Estate audit? What does that have to do with me? He exchanged a quick glance with his colleague before saying the words that would change her life forever. You're not biologically related to Chief Olufemi Dlamini or Madam Ijeoma Dlamini. The sentence hit her like a blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She laughed nervously, shaking her head. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. I look like them, well, like my mother at least. Everyone says. The lawyer slid a document toward her, a printed report with lines of numbers and percentages. This is the DNA result. We ran it twice. The match is 0. Her hands trembled as she read the paper. The words, no biological relation, seemed to scream back at her. So what are you saying? She whispered. The younger lawyer leaned forward, his tone careful. You were kidnapped, Miss Dlamini, 26 years ago, from the Obeid Royal Hospital. Your birth name was Nondine Cube. For a second, the world around her went silent. The hum of the ceiling fan disappeared. Even her heartbeat seemed to stop. Kidnapped her. She looked at them blankly. That can't be true. My mother, she gave birth to me. I've seen the pictures. The older man sighed and opened the envelope he'd brought. Inside were faded photos, a small blood-stained baby blanket, and a cracked hospital tag with the name, Baby Nondi, written in fading ink. This was found in the hospital's old archives, he said. The nurse who handled your file disappeared soon after your birth. She left behind a confession letter, but it was discovered only recently, during the audit of the Dlamini Foundation's documents. Amira stared at the blanket. It was tiny, soft pink fabric now dull with age. Her fingers brushed against the dried stain, and something deep in her chest broke. My real parents, she whispered. Are they alive? The younger lawyer nodded. Yes, Dr. Themba and Mrs. Lindion Cube. They've been searching for you ever since. They never gave up hope. Tears filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. All her life, she'd felt like something didn't fit. The constant pressure to be perfect, the distance from her mother, the coldness from her father. But this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She clutched the hospital tag in her shaking hand. So my whole life, everything I believed, it was all a lie. The lawyer hesitated, then said gently, Not a lie, Miss Dlamini. A stolen story. Amira bowed her head, her tears dropping onto the faded photos. She didn't cry because she'd lost her family. She cried because she'd never truly known who she was in the first place. The long drive to KwaZulu province felt endless. Amira sat by the car window, staring at the dusty roads stretching between hills and tiny villages. Every mile pulled her farther away from the world she'd known, the glittering halls, luxury cars, and designer dresses, and closer to something she couldn't name. Her heart raced. What would she even say to the people who'd been searching for her all these years? Would they really want her after so long? When the car stopped outside a small clinic painted in faded white and blue, Amira's throat tightened. Children played near the gate. A nurse carried boxes of medicine inside. There were no bodyguards, no fancy cars, no marble floors, just warmth and life. One of the lawyers walked ahead to speak with a woman at the entrance. Moments later the woman turned, and Amira froze. She had seen that face before, somewhere deep in her heart. The woman's eyes, soft, tired, kind, felt strangely familiar, like a memory she never knew she had. Mrs. Nkube, the lawyer said gently. This is Amira. For a heartbeat, the woman just stared. Then she dropped the papers in her hands and ran forward, crying out, My baby, my Nandi. Amira didn't move at first. Her knees felt weak, but when the woman reached her and wrapped her arms around her, something inside her broke wide open. She smelled like soap and tears and home. I thought I'd buried you, her mother sobbed against her shoulder. All these years. I thought you were gone forever. Amira clung to her, tears streaming down her face. She had no words, just the feeling of being seen for the first time in her life. Moments later, a man stepped out of the clinic, wiping his hands on his coat, Dr. Themban Cube. When he saw them, he stopped mid-step, his face twisting in disbelief. Then he rushed forward, his voice shaking. Lindio, is it really her? His wife nodded, still crying. The doctor cupped Amira's face in his trembling hands, searching her eyes as if trying to recognize the baby he lost. You have her eyes, he whispered. My Nandi. My little girl. They held each other for what felt like forever. The nurses nearby wiped their tears, and even the patients at the clinic stepped outside to watch the reunion. Someone recorded it on a phone, and by the next day, the story spread everywhere. Lost daughter of Ncube family found after 26 years. Reporters showed up at the clinic gates. TV crews offered interviews. But Amira refused them all. She didn't come for fame or pity. She came for truth. That night, sitting with her real parents in their small kitchen, she listened to stories about the baby they lost, how they searched hospitals, paid detectives, prayed every single night. Her mother showed her an old photo of a newborn wrapped in the same pink blanket Amira had been given by the lawyers. Amira traced the photo with her finger, her chest aching with both love and grief. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. Her mother took her hand gently. You're Nandi, my daughter. And now that you're home, that's all that matters. For the first time in a long time, Amira smiled through her tears. The mansion, the money, the inheritance, none of it compared to this moment. She had finally found what she'd been missing her whole life, belonging. The truth came out slowly, like poison spreading through water. After the DNA results made headlines, investigators reopened Amira's case. Reporters crowded the Dlamini mansion, asking how the country's most powerful couple could have raised a kidnapped child without knowing. Chief Dlamini stayed silent, but Madame Igioma vanished from the public eye. Something about her quiet disappearance made people suspicious. Weeks later, the lawyers called Amira again. There's something you need to see, they said. When she arrived at their office, one of them slid a faded brown envelope across the table. Inside was a letter written in shaky handwriting. It was found among the estate papers, he said, from a woman named Nurse Agatha Moyo. She worked at Obeid Royal Hospital the year you were born. Amira unfolded the letter, her heart pounding. The ink had bled in places, but the words were still clear enough to read. Madame Igioma Dlamini offered me a great sum of money to switch her stillborn baby with a living child. I was weak. I did it. The real parents were Dr. and Mrs. Ncube. I tried to tell the truth years later, but they threatened me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I couldn't die without confessing. The paper slipped from Amira's hands. For a long time she just sat there, silent, her tears falling onto the old ink. The lawyers didn't say a word. What could they possibly say? So it was true. Every nightmare, every unanswered question. Madame Igioma had lost her baby that night, and in her grief, she had stolen another woman's child to fill the emptiness. And that child had been her. When the story broke, it spread like wildfire. Dlamini Empire built on stolen child scandal, screamed the headlines. News anchors replayed the footage of the slap from the birthday banquet, now with a cruel twist. The man who had disowned her wasn't even her real father. The Dlamini family's business deals began to crumble. Partners withdrew, donors resigned, and the foundation's sponsors backed out. Chief Dlamini's empire started collapsing overnight. Amira watched it all unfold from KwaZulu, sitting in her parents' small living room with her hands clasped tightly together. She didn't feel joy, not even revenge, just confusion and sorrow. Her father, Dr. Ncube, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You don't have to carry their sin, my child, he said softly. But she couldn't help feeling torn apart. The Dlaminis had stolen her, yes, but they had also raised her. Madame Igioma had taught her how to braid her hair, how to play piano, how to dress for charity galas. Chief Dlamini had walked her to school, bought her first camera, called her my jewel. Now all of it felt tainted, built on lies and stolen moments. Late one night, Amira sat by the window of her new home, holding the letter. The wind outside whispered through the trees. She whispered to herself, "How do I hate someone who loved me? How do I forgive someone who ruined me?" She didn't know the answer, but she knew one thing for sure. The truth had set her free, even if it shattered everything she thought she was. Within days, the story took over the whole continent. News stations replayed clips of Amira's slap at the birthday banquet, now calling it the moment the stolen heir was exposed. Social media went wild. Her name was everywhere. Hashtag stolen heir, hashtag justice for Nandi, hashtag the truth of Dlamini. People who once mocked her now called her brave. Others demanded justice for the Ncube family. Every hour, new secrets surfaced. Old hospital records, photos of Madame Igioma with the nurse who'd written the confession letter, even reports of hush money paid to silence witnesses. The Dlamini name, once powerful and untouchable, was now a scandal. Their companies started crumbling. Business partners cut ties. Banks froze accounts. The foundation was shut down under government investigation. Reporters camped outside the Dlamini mansion, shouting questions through the gates. Chief Dlamini, who once ruled Lagos society like a king, was now a prisoner in his own home. His wife had vanished, said to be hiding somewhere in Abuja. Meanwhile, Amira stayed silent. She refused every interview, every offer. She didn't care about the fame or the noise. She just wanted peace, time to breathe and understand who she really was. But peace wouldn't come easily. Every day her phone buzzed with calls from unknown numbers. She ignored them all, until one evening, as she was helping her real mother at the clinic, her phone lit up again. This time it was her old home number. Her hand froze. For a moment she thought about letting it ring. Then she pressed decline. Seconds later a message appeared. "They're arresting your mother. Please help us." Her breath caught. She stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. Madame Igioma, the woman who had stolen her, lied to her, and destroyed 2 families, was being arrested. Her real mother, Lindio, noticed her pale face. "What is it, my child?" Amira hesitated, her voice cracking. "They're taking her." Madame Igioma. She wanted to feel relief. She wanted to say, "Good. She deserves it." But instead her eyes filled with tears. Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the pain, a part of her still remembered the woman who used to hold her hand on her first day of school, who kissed her forehead when she was sick. "I can't just ignore this," she whispered. Her father frowned softly. "She took you from us, Amira." "I know," she said, wiping her tears. "But she's still the woman who raised me." That night, Amira sat awake, scrolling through the endless flood of online posts. People cheered for her, praised her strength, and cursed the Dlaminis. But she didn't feel strong. She felt human, torn between justice and compassion, between the past and the truth. As the rain tapped against the window, she whispered to herself, "What do you do when the person who hurt you is also the one who once loved you?" She didn't know what she would say if she saw Madame Igioma again. But one thing was clear. She couldn't pretend it didn't matter. Not anymore. The courtroom was packed that morning. Reporters, cameras, and curious faces filling every seat. The air buzzed with tension as Amira walked in, wearing a simple white dress. No diamonds, no designer heels, just calm strength. The flash of cameras followed her every move, but she kept her head high. This wasn't about fame anymore. It was about truth. At the front, Madame Igioma sat trembling, her once elegant face lined with exhaustion. Chief Dlamini sat beside her, his proud shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. For a moment, Amira almost didn't recognize them. These weren't the people who once ruled Lagos society. They looked like broken statues of who they used to be. When it was her turn to speak, Amira walked to the witness stand. The room fell silent. Even the journalists stopped typing. She took a slow breath and began, her voice steady but soft. "I was raised by the Dlaminis, by the people sitting right there. They taught me how to walk, how to read, how to dream. Call them Mom and Dad. I loved them. Her eyes glistened as she looked at Madame Igioma. But they also stole my life. They stole another family's child. And that child was me. Madame Igioma burst into quiet sobs. Chief Dlamini closed his eyes, his jaw trembling. Amira continued, her tone neither angry nor bitter. I'm not here for revenge. I just want truth. Justice doesn't need hatred. It only needs honesty. The judge nodded slowly, his pen resting against his notebook. Thank you, Miss Dlamini, he said. When the verdict came, the courtroom held its breath. Madame Igioma was sentenced to 5 years in prison for child abduction and fraud. The room gasped. Some thought the punishment was too light, others said it was fair. But Amira didn't flinch. She had already decided that forgiveness was her kind of justice. Then the judge turned to Chief Dlamini. As for you, Chief, he said firmly, your estate and assets are to remain frozen pending investigation. You are hereby removed as the executor of your foundation. The chief nodded weakly. He looked at Amira, tears glistening in his eyes, but she couldn't look back. Too many years of silence and lies stood between them. And then came the final twist, the one no one expected. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. Furthermore, based on inheritance law, Miss Amira Nkube is the rightful heir to the Nkube family's assets, including their charity foundation valued at $80 million. A murmur spread across the room like a wave. Cameras flashed wildly. Journalists whispered into microphones. Amira's heart pounded. $80 million. Didn't even make sense. Her real parents, the humble doctors she'd just met, had been quietly building a medical foundation for years. And now, by blood and law, she was its heir. Madame Igioma broke down completely, crying out, I only wanted a child. I didn't mean to destroy lives. Amira closed her eyes, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She whispered under her breath, and I only wanted the truth. As the judge banged the gavel, ending the session, Amira turned to leave. Reporters shouted her name, cameras followed her, but she didn't stop. Outside the courthouse, the sun felt warm on her face. She looked up at the sky and took a deep breath. She had lost everything she thought mattered. Her family, her fortune, her name. But in return, she had gained something greater. Peace, purpose, and a new beginning that no one could steal again. The months after the trial felt like a blur for Amira. One day she was in courtrooms and headlines. The next she was sitting in her new mother's kitchen, sipping tea and listening to stories about the family she never got to grow up with. Her real mother, Dr. Thandine Nkube, treated her like she'd never been gone. Her father, gentle and quiet, often just watched her with misty eyes, as if trying to make up for 20 lost years with one long look. Amira spent weeks learning about the family's work, the small medical foundation her parents had started to help underprivileged children. That's when the idea came to her. She didn't want to keep the Dlamini name or their old foundation. She wanted to turn her pain into something powerful. So, she rebranded everything and called it the Nandi Project, after her late grandmother, a woman known for rescuing lost children during the civil unrest decades ago. This time, the mission was clear: to build hospitals and safe homes for kidnapped, abandoned, and displaced children across Africa. The first branch opened in Soweto, the next in Nairobi, then Abuja. Everywhere she went, people greeted her with open arms and tears in their eyes. Some had followed her story on the news. Others were just grateful that someone cared. At the opening of the first Nandi Children's Hospital, Amira stood in front of the cameras once again. This time, she wasn't the scandal everyone whispered about. She was hope itself. Children ran around with balloons, doctors in white coats smiled proudly, and her mother stood beside her, holding her hand. I didn't rise from wealth, Amira said into the microphone, her voice firm but gentle. I rose from truth, and that's something no one can take from me. The crowd erupted in applause. Tears ran down her cheeks as she looked at the giant sign, the Nandi Project, healing the lost. Soon, the same media that once called her the girl who lived a lie, now named her Africa's Phoenix. Talk shows invited her to speak. Magazines begged for interviews. She was featured on billboards and charity campaigns. But Amira stayed humble. She didn't wear luxury gowns or host glamorous parties. Instead, she spent her time visiting children's wards, reading to orphans, and signing partnerships with hospitals. When journalists asked her how she managed to forgive, she always smiled softly and said, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain." Her success wasn't about fame anymore, it was about purpose. The Nandi project grew faster than anyone imagined. Within 2 years, it had built 7 hospitals, rescued hundreds of children, and sponsored thousands more in school programs. Sometimes late at night, Amira would look out of her window at the city lights and whisper, This is what the pain was for." She had lost her name, her home, and her childhood, but she had gained something far greater. She had turned betrayal into blessing, heartbreak into healing. And with every child she helped, she felt her own heart stitching itself back together, piece by piece. She didn't rise from gold or privilege. She rose from ashes. And that's why the world called her Africa's Phoenix. It had been almost a year since the trial when Amira saw a familiar black car pull into the clinic courtyard. She was just finishing rounds with the nurses, checking on the children in the ward when she froze. Chief Dlamini stepped out slowly, his once powerful frame now weak, his suit hanging loose on his shoulders. His hair was gray, his eyes tired. The man who once ruled over empires now looked like a ghost carrying his own guilt. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of hospital machines filled the silence, along with the faint laughter of children in the next room. Amira stood still, her heart steady. She wasn't the same woman he had once thrown out. She had rebuilt herself from ashes, and this time she was unbreakable. Chief Dlamini's voice trembled as he finally spoke. "I didn't know, Amira. I swear I didn't. Thought you were ours. I thought I was doing right by you." Amira's eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. She had spent months preparing for this moment, and now that it was here, she felt no rage, only peace. She nodded slowly. "You may have stolen my beginning," she said quietly, "but you can't touch my ending." Her words landed heavy in the room, yet there was no anger in them, just truth. She turned and gestured for him to follow. "Come with me." She led him through the clinic, past the bright murals painted by volunteers, past rooms filled with giggling children and nurses singing lullabies. The air smelled like antiseptic and hope. One little boy waved at her from his bed, clutching a small teddy bear. Amira bent down, fixed his blanket, and smiled. Chief Dlamini watched in silence, his eyes glistening. He saw the life she had built, the joy she had chosen despite everything. No mansion, no boardroom, no fortune had ever held this kind of grace. When they reached the end of the hallway, Amira stopped beside a window where the afternoon sun poured in. Outside, children were playing in the garden, chasing bubbles and laughter. She turned to him gently. "You see that?" she asked. "That's what healing looks like. That's what love does when it's real." The old man's lips quivered. "You became everything I could never teach you to be," he whispered. Amira smiled faintly. "That's because you tried to raise a princess," she said softly. "But life turned me into a woman." He looked down, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he repeated, voice breaking. Amira placed a hand on his shoulder, not out of affection but forgiveness. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "I just couldn't save the man you were." Chief Dlamini nodded slowly, understanding that her forgiveness was not a bridge back, it was closure. As he turned to leave, Amira watched him go, not as the man who had slapped her or the one who took her from her real family, but as someone finally facing his truth. Behind her, a child's laughter echoed through the hallway, light and free. Amira closed her eyes and smiled. No slap, no lie, no stolen life could silence that sound. It was the sound of her victory, quiet, gentle, but eternal. The grand hall shimmered with golden lights, filled with laughter, music, and the hum of cameras. It was the annual Nandi Project Gala, a night celebrating the Foundation's work across Africa. Amira stood backstage, taking a slow breath as she looked out at the hundreds of faces waiting for her. Politicians, doctors, students, and journalists, all gathered to hear the woman whose story had once shocked the world. When she finally stepped on stage, The crowd rose in applause. Amira smiled warmly, her long white gown glowing under the lights. She waited for the cheers to fade, then spoke softly, her voice steady and full of grace. "They took my name, my bloodline, my inheritance," she began. "But they couldn't take my purpose." The room went silent. Every eye was on her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small silver pendant, the one that had been found wrapped in her baby blanket years ago. It once belonged to her grandmother, Nandi. Amira held it up, the metal glinting in the light. "This was all I had left from the day I was born," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But maybe that was enough, because sometimes, being lost is how destiny finds you." For a moment you could hear nothing, not even a whisper. Then the audience erupted into thunderous applause. Some were crying, others cheering. Amira looked out at them, her heart full. She wasn't standing on a stage built by money or privilege. She was standing on one built by truth, pain, and courage. As the lights dimmed and the music swelled, Amira smiled through her tears. She wasn't the stolen daughter anymore. She was home, in her purpose, in her power, and in her peace.